All right, Johnny. Well, I guess I already messed up the first question. Who am I sitting with here today?
Johnny Graff.
Okay. And what are you studying here at the University of Denver?
Communications.
Yeah? What year are you?
I'm a senior.
Senior?
Yeah.
So you're headed out, right?
Yeah, pretty soon.
What are the plans after?
I don't know, get a job.
Yeah?
I don't have much plans yet.
Much plans in any type of field yet?
Nope.
All right. Well, as you know, we're doing this project for free speech, for our seminar on free speech. What is your understanding of free speech nowadays, 21st century?
The most basic thing I can think of is the First Amendment.
Okay.
It's to be able to say what you want as long as it's not harmful to other people.
Okay. And do you think a lot of people get away with saying harmful things? And it's actually funny that we're, sitting next to the Hillel community right next to us on the bridge, which we just heard about some events that happened here on campus. Do you think people get punished for saying hurtful, hateful things?
I do think people do get punished, but I do think there's definitely times where people get away with it. I think that people especially now, are very good at being anonymous and sneaky and hiding their true intentions.
And it's true with the help of, like we've been talking about social media.
Yeah.
There's a lot of leeway that, the laws and administration, or I shouldn't say administration, but policy has not made it super clear on how to, operate within the social media realm.
Exactly.
Right. So those are some of the pathways or loopholes that people can use. Mm-hmm. But how important, I guess this is the second question, how important is free speech as a value to you?
I think it's very important. I think especially now with cancel culture, more and more people are being censored and not trying to say their true beliefs. And it's just becoming more and more groupthink. Which I feel like can be a detriment to society because new ideas aren't flowing.
Now that you bring up that groupthink and social media and cancel culture, how do you find yourself trying to escape that realm of, just following what everyone believes? What are the certain strategies, I guess, that you do?
I feel like you should mostly speak your opinion before reading and looking at other people's opinions.
Okay.
I feel like if you take in other people's opinions before you state yours, people tend to change theirs to match the general.
But how does that work? If you're going onto the social media realm, right? You're going onto Facebook, Instagram. I don't know what you use, right? But in order to make a post, you have to be on the platform itself.
Yes.
And while you're making that post, there's going to be certain things that you're going to be influenced by, either by choice or by coincidence. So, I mean, sometimes it is difficult to, stay away from it all unless you live under a cave or live under a rock, right?
That's true.
And then you have to make a post.
With how social media is so targeted towards the individual viewer, I feel like once they find certain beliefs, they tend to push that belief more towards you, and then it just deeply involves you into that belief.
So it's perfect that you bring this up about social media and algorithms, right? Now that social media pushes algorithms for each users to, create an incentive to get on the platform and to continue using the platform. The next question would be, how do you interact with your own social medias? Do you use it mainly as a place of entertainment, as a place of where you can display and publicize your beliefs, or how do you personally?
I mostly use it for pure entertainment factors. I feel like especially since so much of social media is jokes and false, it's really hard to find the facts and politics that follow in social media. So for me, it's mostly just humor, comedy, and just time to.
Do you think it's important that we should start treating these platforms as a place of the marketplace for ideas, the marketplace for change, in a sense, which I know it's already happening, but in a sense, and we've talked about it as well in class, where online social media platforms don't really necessarily create or cause change, but this is a platform where we can debate, and open the platform to talk about these types of things.
It's to an extent, because especially with the censorship, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes people won't be able to exchange the ideas because the moderator, for example, might be like, oh, I only like this one idea, so I'm going to ban anyone else from participating in this topic of conversation. So I feel like it is hard to have all different ideas exchanged. But if it's done well and done right, I think it is very.
So then now, do you think, now that you brought up the moderators, do you think those moderators are infringing upon the freedom of speech of users on these platforms?
To an extent, I think that a lot of the censorship isn't needed. I think there are definitely times when people will do hurtful or attacking messages where they obviously do need to be censored. But I do think that there are definitely times where censorship is used when it isn't needed.
So now that you believe in the sense that, you know, these platforms should be open to everyone displaying their beliefs and their ideas, and that there should be, I'm guessing from what you were saying, little to none moderation, or, you know, to an extent, you know, violence, sexual content, you know, things that are deemed as harmful, should they be, how could I put this? Should they be spread out through most platforms now in order to increase dialogue, or is it too far out of the water that we just can't fix it now?
I think it is difficult because, especially how many kids are on social media and stuff like that, it's hard to try to limit the viewership for safety for everyone. If you don't want explicit things going into the eyes of a 10-year-old, so there are censorship based on the viewers. So I think right now it's really difficult to change the censorship things, but there are definitely things that I think they should be a little bit more lenient when it comes to censoring.
Okay. Now, you as a user of social media, do you find yourself looking for opposing ideas, or do you just use your platforms as, and I know you mentioned that, you know, social media is mainly just entertainment for you, but how often do you find posts that you don't agree with, that you regularly don't, you know, interact with that idea itself?
I would say I see pretty often, and then a lot of the time I'll look in like comments and stuff like that and read it, like what everyone like agrees and disagrees with. I think that the comment section is a lot of the times more useful than the actual post, because you get to see like a further discussion on the actual topic of debate that someone posts with no like conversation.
And
Really, I usually don't get too deep into something when I'm looking at comments, because once again, they are usually pretty anonymous and some of them are jokes and you can't really tell the full intention behind a comment. So I usually just skim over like the top, like most liked and read comments.
Okay. So you're kind of taking this counterculture approach to staying away from the most viewed and most pushed out content, right?
Yeah.
So I read this, and the whole inspiration from this podcast and project came from a paper by Kat Reimer, or Kat and Reimer. I think that's I'm butchering up their last name, but they were talking about freedom of speech. Essentially, in a general sense, is talked about in what is being said and who is being said thing, right? But now we get into this social media realm where the audience is now a big importance to this, because if moderators can limit what and whose content is being seen throughout the platform, then in a sense, if they start limiting some users, some other content, in a sense that's infringing, right, on the freedom of speech, because in a sense the idea of Facebook, the idea of Twitter was to post these things as a marketplace, as a town hall, right, where we can share and spread ideas.
Yeah. And I feel like that's where social media tends to be straying away, that they've been like, oh, we want to share our ideas and everyone should have the freedom of speech. But then once someone shares an idea that isn't liked, it's immediately censored, which I feel like then just causes more agreement in the one area and no one to debate it, and then people become more sensitive to the topic.
Now, we talked about this in class as well, where Twitter doesn't seem to be like a place where you can find the nuance of argument, right? Where you can find the positions of people's arguments in depth necessarily, because you're only limited by 140 characters, and then you have to go through they call it a thread, right? But do you think the idea should be to use social media as platform to start the conversations and then move them outside of the internet realm?
I think so. I feel like if you really want to get into a very detailed argument with someone, you should probably do it privately and not in front of everyone for everyone to see. I feel like when you're doing something in front of everyone for everyone to see, people tend to change their original actions and beliefs in order to be liked by the general population.
So then, okay, I guess getting close to closing it up now, but you as a DU student, do you feel like there's a lot of people on campus or even you yourself actually use your right to freedom of speech? Do you feel like you're using it to its full potential, or do you kind of just shy away from it and say, oh, I'm going to do my own thing, keep my head down, do my own thing. As long as nobody interacts with me, I won't interact with them.
I kind of keep my head down, do my own thing. I tend to not stick my nose where it doesn't belong, I guess.
And why is that?
I feel like, especially now in society, there's a lot of landmines that you can step on. And if you say one thing, it can just completely ruin a relationship for you if you say one thing wrong. So I feel like a lot of the times when you're in one of these sensitive topic conversations, if you don't have very specific wording, it can lead to a bad ending.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, even coming from the perspective of a male in, largely female courses in the communication department, we had to really be careful to not offend, anyone, because we're not there to offend anyone. We're there to learn.
Exactly.
But sometimes a lot of these things can be subjective, right?
Yes.
So those are the things that we have to be conscious of. But thank you, Johnny.
Of course.
Thank you for your help.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I hope you can, spread this throughout your own network.
I will.
And I really have plans to do this more often with my own podcast. So
Perfect.
definitely stay tuned for it. But thank you.
Of course.
You don't have to look into any of them. You can just look into me. Look into my eyes if you want. Okay. So obviously we're doing a project together, but I think it would be good for the audience. What is your name?
Ann Didier.
And what year are you here at the University of Denver?
A senior.
Senior?
Yep.
And you're studying comm, right?
Yes, communications and then marketing and psych minors. So.
Wow, so double
Well,
major and a minor?
No.
Oh, okay.
2 minors.
2 minors, 1
Yeah.
major. Okay. Overall experience, you're on your way out, right? You're headed out of here. You're graduating in the spring?
Yep. Job search, kind of stressful, but we're gonna make it. So.
And plans staying in Denver or?
I'll be going back home.
Okay.
Still have to figure out what I'll do when I get there.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Perfect. All right. So you obviously know about the project that we're doing, right? Freedom of speech and the way it interacts with social media and the ways that moderators work within it. But what is your understanding of free speech, either now that we've gone through the course or, previous beliefs?
Yeah, so I think that free speech, obviously, of course, we have the First Amendment and everyone has that right to say what they believe or what they're thinking. And of course, you're going to be judged for that, but it's not, I guess, just, yes, First Amendment rights. But then there's also the issue of hate speech and harmful speech and all of that, which is, I think, something that we've been really discussing in class, kind of, where does the line get drawn between having that First Amendment right and then crossing the line into hate speech, and where should that,
Because
when is it not free speech?
Exactly, because we've been talking about freedom of speech allows you the right to say, in a sense, what you want and the beliefs that you want. But it also doesn't mean that just because someone is offended, that is hate speech per se, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And that's where that line is drawn, and you kind of have to operate. And I think even the lawyers that are in freedom of speech or hate speech that deal with that type of law have such a difficult job, because even the cases that we go over, it's so muddled, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so how important do you think freedom of speech is to you as a value? Being here on a college campus, and even you becoming an adult and searching for a career.
Yeah, I think that free speech is very important. No matter what side you sit on politically, it is very important to get your message across about different pressing topics that you might encounter, all of that. So, again, as I mentioned early, there is the issue of hate speech. So, I think it's important for people to just be mindful. Like, it's not that hard to not say hateful things,
Yeah.
but
No, yeah.
I mean, well, maybe it is considering that there is so much of it, especially on social media.
Well, and I even brought this up with Johnny about, I don't know if you heard about the Hillel community here at DU, where they put pork on their
Yeah.
meeting space, community space, and said some anti-Semitic things here on campus. So it's very prevalent, that we're having this conversation right now. Do you think that this hate speech goes punished most of the time? Do you think it just goes, hear it in the headlines and then it just goes out of?
Yeah. I think the most that I've seen really happen is maybe a slap on the wrist, which I don't really know if that's effective because, like, what more can you do? You can't, it's considered free speech, I guess. So you can't really punish someone. You can cancel them, like cancel culture. But again,
In a sense, that's a social punishment, right?
Yeah, social punishment for sure. But then again, like we've seen, like Kanye West say very hateful anti-Semitic things. The Balenciaga case with the child stuff with the BDSM.
Yeah.
And all of those companies and people that do that hateful stuff, it's just, again, the slap on the wrist, and then maybe a few months later or a year later,
It's
they're
back
fine.
in full swing.
Yeah. So I don't really know what the current good way to go about that is, but I think there definitely needs to be more education on all of this hate speech and kind of a push for people to be just not say this stuff, even though it is at this point free speech.
Yeah.
But just have that education that might prevent
and
stuff like
you know
that.
how we were talking about going into this debate before we go this next week. We're going to be talking about how do we combat against hate speech or freedom of speech. Should there be more or should there be more moderation, and that tug of war essentially. But yes.
Yeah.
So then the next question is, how do you interact with your own social media platforms? Do you use it for entertainment, how exactly do you interact?
Yeah, I mostly just use my platforms for entertainment. I don't really like to get, I know this is kind of not the best, but I don't really like to get involved with all of like social matters on social media. It's just not, I don't know. I just use it more for my personal entertainment, and if I want to speak about a social issue,
and that's perfectly your right, because I think when you start bringing in those political or social movements into your social media, then that brings more eyes to say there's criticism that could be done on your part, on your profile, on your character online per se, right? Because there's a different persona in person versus online.
Definitely.
So I think people do the same thing that you are, and I'm not condemning against it, right? There's understanding as to why, because there's that potential where things could go wrong, right? I'm not implying that you have horrible ideas, that you're gonna be doing this terrible thing, but the way other people interpret some things, and then that could lead to you, having consequences for the rest of your life, which is understanding, right?
Yeah.
It's your right to do that.
And I think really, in my experience, no matter what you post on social media can be criticized. And I think that's also why I don't like getting really into those different topics, because people are very quick to jump on you no matter what you're saying. There's going to be backlash with no matter what you're
But
saying.
do you still see the value of what social media and these platforms are doing for all types of people?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of awareness that posting on platforms like that brings. I just don't know if it's I think there's more of like a bandwagon idea.
Uh-huh.
So we saw like the black squares being posted on
Yeah,
Instagram, and people were really just posting them to be like, I did it. And then they weren't doing anything on top of that. So I think if you're posting stuff like that, it's important to reach out to other areas, maybe donate to a cause or something like that, not just sit there behind a screen posting something. It really, at that point, doesn't mean much besides getting awareness for it. But go the extra mile to donate or go further with your awareness.
So then, okay, now this is where I brought up the inspiration of this entire idea and video and project essentially came from a study done by Kat Reimer, I believe. I know I'm mispronouncing their last name, but I'm trying. They did a study and analyzed the ways that free speech is talked about. You know, they see a lot of free speech in the sense in the more what do you call it? In the more like general sense is always thought of by the person that's saying it and by what is being said, but never in a sense of who's actually moderating what is being said. Because now when we post things on social media, they have to be moderated by the platform itself and then pushed out to users and an audience, right?
Yeah.
So now that in a sense we have freedom of speech for the speaker and for the actual content, what happens when there's moderation to said freedom of speech? Do you think that's an infringement of these rights, or is it, again, a company doing what they choose and
Yeah, I think that's kind of a hard topic because I know there's a ongoing case, I'm pretty sure, that's discussing that idea of, is it the platform that is
like shadow banning in a sense?
responsible for these things that people are saying on their platform, or is it the person on the platform that's responsible for what they're saying? And I think that's an important thing to think about. I personally don't believe that there should be intense censorship and moderation on social media, because that is a form of free speech to go on those platforms and share your opinion.
And that's what they're built for, right?
Yeah,
They're
definitely.
built for a marketplace of ideas, right? Each user is entitled to their idea and their view. But then again, if you are offended, or if that doesn't mean that they don't get the right to do that anymore, right? Maybe you just don't interact with that user.
Yeah,
You can turn
definitely.
you can turn off the platform itself.
Yeah.
But I do share that same view where, moderation should not be coming from the platform itself. Should be coming from the users and the actual communities,
Yeah.
right?
Deciding what you want to be viewing is really important. And I think someone in our class, I think it was actually Johnny in our class, had mentioned maybe an idea to incorporate like a shielded or protected platform where you have to press a button that says, yes, I want to see this.
Okay.
And I know on Instagram there's stuff like that now with like very
So like give your consent that you may be seeing some
like sensitive content.
Yes.
Continue or skip this video.
So the kind of like the speakeasy of content, right? Like it's the back room, it's the shady room.
But then I guess there's also the issue of does that just promote people to say this stuff more because they know that they're going to have this private space to be saying those things and no one's gonna say anything against it. So I don't know how that would work.
And even in the sense of, younger underage, we already see people, underage people go on to pornographic sites that they have that same type of block, and it's like all you got to do is just press a button and then you're into that
Like
universe.
are you of 18 or something?
Exactly.
Same with like, you know, if you access a site, basically just for alcohol, it'll say, "Are you above 21?" And then
sure.
but there's no proof. So
Exactly. There's
like
no
that.
proof, and again, you're not gonna wanna. There's already so much data, and our phones already take so much data of our own data that if we have to put in our ID or if we have to put in our credit card, we're even worried and
more monitoring.
because we're like, oh well, where is this essentially gonna end up? Whose hands is this gonna end up? So this is the conversation that we're all having, and I'm glad that we're having because we actually get to sit down in class. We don't actually get to share these views, right? Because we have our content our class course that we have to go over and actually run through, but we don't actually get to sit down with all of our classmates and share these in depth. But now, do you think here on campus, you as a student have exercised your right to freedom of speech, or do you do you feel like you've exercised your right here as a student, as an undergrad at
I
DU?
think so. The only thing I will say is that yes, I've never felt like my free speech, that right has been taken away. And I guess I know there's groups that they're deemed voiceless because of different situations and people pouncing on them and stuff like that. But I will say that in classes, I don't always feel like I can totally share my honest opinion about things, just worrying that people might really judge me. And I think that that's kind of a common issue that occurs within a classroom because there is so much of that. Again, the bandwagon idea of where if one person says this, no one really wants to go against what they're saying in fear that they might offend someone. Even if it's not anything super controversial, you never know when someone's gonna be like.
Now, do you think that could be alleviated or resolved, not in a sense completely, but strengthened by trust of the actual class or group that we have? Do you think that we as students in that course, because there's about 20 of us, I'd say that's roughly estimate, right? Do you think we should do some type of group bonding where we know, hey, you know what, this is a space where we know things aren't going to leave this, maybe even contracts, I don't know, NDA? Do you think that would be a sort of solution to actually bring out those real deep ideas and views? Or
I don't think we really need to go that far to get like signed documents and things like that, but I think what's really helping for me personally is the different debates that I've so far done
3, right? Yeah.
3 of them. Yeah, I had my 4th one today actually.
Oh wow.
So I think things like that are really important within the classroom to kind of have students practice this idea of disagreeing and respecting disagreements. So I think that's something that should be continued within classroom environments, not even just in communications, but in different.
Well, the reason
biology,
I brought up
chemistry.
it's such an importance is because we're in the communication department, right? We are the ones that are essentially learning the skills to communicate with professionals, with communities, with nonprofit organizations, with all these types of realms that are outside of the university. We should learn to not only just philosophize about the practice of trust and what it can do to a conversation or to a discussion, but also put it into practice, because I personally feel I don't think there's enough of practice. There's a lot of philosophizing, right?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I've always said this, like, everyone should be required to take a communications class. I know like a few engineers and they suck at communicating because that's not their thing. Like they sit behind a computer or whatever all day. And many different majors, business majors, all of that, it should be required to take communications classes because it comes up in literally everything we do.
Yeah.
And it's becoming like an even more important topic within our lives with social media communication and free speech and all of this stuff that's really important within our society today. So yeah, that's my view on the whole
Well, thank you for
communications
joining
thing.
us. obviously a big help to this whole production. This is obviously being more large scale than what I'm used to, but yes, big thank you and
Yeah, thank you.
best of luck after college because I
Thank
don't know if
you.
I'm
To
going to
you
see
as
you
well,
next. Yes,
yeah.
thank you. All right. Red light, everything cool. All right, so we'll start again.
Okay.
Name and then what are you studying here at DU?
My name is Kate Dillon,
Okay.
and I'm studying biological sciences.
And fourth year, third year.
Fourth year.
So you're out of here next quarter. I'm
Yeah,
guessing? Yeah.
in June.
And are you from Denver, Colorado, or are you from?
I'm
different
from
state?
Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, okay. Is the plan to head back home once you're done with college, or stay here in Denver?
I don't know. We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, you still have a quarter, 10
Hopefully,
weeks.
I won't have to go back home.
Because that's it. It's a big expense and a big like headache to move all of your stuff. I bet getting here was a challenge.
Yeah, but cheaper to live at home for a bit, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Not necessarily ideal, though. But yeah.
Okay, so what are your understandings of freedom of speech as of right now, as a college student? Whatever.
I mean, it's like in the Bill of Rights.
Okay.
It's our like First Amendment, I think.
Okay.
And you have the freedom to say kind of whatever you want within limits
Okay.
once it kind of infringes upon other people's rights.
Perfect. So those are the main pillars that we've been learning all in class. That you can say your beliefs, your ideological beliefs to a certain extent, but there is a sense that you can't say anything. Right? There's something called hate speech, and that is a crime. So, how important do you think free speech is as a value to you personally?
I mean, I think it's extremely important. And
Okay.
I really value that part about America that we care about freedom of speech. It's important to hear like everybody's opinions.
And did you study abroad while you're here at DU?
Yeah, I did.
And-
this past quarter.
Oh, okay. And did you see anything where people were limited to what they can and can't say? And because where did you study abroad? I guess that would be the question.
I studied abroad in Prague, Czech Republic.
Okay.
But I did not experience
No,
people being like limited in what they could and
like
could not
fearful of what's gonna happen to them.
say. No.
No. Okay. So now that we're thinking of freedom of speech and a lot of the realms where we see freedom of speech actuated is on social media. How do you usually interact with your social media platforms? What do you use them for?
I guess mainly just for like networking and
Okay.
communicating with friends.
Yeah. Entertainment based, not really.
Yeah.
You're not there to make a statement or a change or anything like that. Which
Not really.
Yeah.
I don't really like putting that stuff out on social media.
and why is that?
necessarily. I don't know. I just feel like it can be really controversial sometimes. Also, like my follower base is very similar to me in my views.
Okay.
So like me posting something that's like liberal leaning per se,
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily. I don't know. I just feel like it's not really like influencing anybody else. Like.
So you don't
Because
think it's gonna
they're,
maybe?
like kind of like my followers are all kind of like that as well.
So it's all you come into the consensus that everyone that you follow is like, oh, they may agree with that, or to some extent they may agree with that, right?
Yeah, for the most part, honestly. Yeah.
Do you think that we should start using those platforms as a sense to generate a marketplace for ideas and find differing ideas, or should those platforms stay the way that they are and continue to be tailored for the user?
Wait, what was the first part of the question?
So do you
Sorry.
think these platforms, should they be more tailored for the user, or should they be more of as a platform, as a town hall for marketplace for ideas, places where we can discuss and talk about,
I
pressing
mean, I
issues?
feel like they're a place for both of that right now in a
Okay.
sense. Like it really is a place for discourse to happen. And like if you're interested in that and you want to view that kind of content, then you can make that happen. But also at the same time, those social media platforms do tailor like the information that you see.
Mm-hmm.
So like even Instagram, like it gives you like suggested posts and stuff now. Like all of those that I see are like kind of feeding into beliefs and values that I already have, or interests, I guess, like cooking or, you know, like
Yeah.
random things like that. But I mean, I feel like it's kind of for both.
Uh-huh. So you got to tailor it your own algorithm the way that you want to interact with the platform, right? Is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, in some sense. Like when I used to have TikTok, like if I would see like a political video and then I'd be like, okay, if I watch this, like I'm gonna keep seeing those.
Yeah.
But, like I don't want to go on TikTok to see that. Like
So
I go on a
would you
news
block
platform.
those, or would you say like
No, I would just like swipe really fast.
okay.
Because then the algorithm like sees
It would
that.
pick that up. So now that
Yeah.
these algorithms are very advanced and they're getting better and better each day, I think the more we use them, the better they get at tailoring to our views and what we want to see. But I guess I wanted to ask, in a sense, where you see freedom of speech, being brought up in a sense of who's saying the said thing or what is being said, right? The actual content. But we don't really get to see the audience and the limiting factor, right? Because when we think of social media, we have our content. Like I say, we make a post, right? We put it up into Instagram or our platform. The platform has to moderate and process that, and then it pushes it out to an audience. Do you think that by us, having that middleman of the social media, is that an infringement of freedom of speech? Because in a sense, they control what is being said, who they can tailor that to, who can they put it out to. Because like we know, Kim Kardashian, huge following on Instagram, huge. They get their posts pushed out, throughout all platforms or throughout the platform. But if we were to make a post, there's nowhere near as much, pushing of our content to that form.
Right.
Do you think that there's that infringement of,
It's hard to say because, I mean, honestly, I don't think there's like an infringement with that because, like, it's not in freedom of speech. It's not like, oh, everyone equally kind of like has this like opportunity for freedom of speech and for like the people to equally
But it's there,
hear your
right?
ideas. And also, like, if we were to say that was an infringement of freedom of speech on social media, then it's like, I don't know, it's like kind of contradictory because without social media, then you don't get that like that pathway for a freedom of speech.
Because that essentially
sense.
that's where
Like it allows it is
for
a
that to be
platform
it's a
for-
platform for that.
I mean, for speech. I don't know if freedom of speech would be
No, but
correct
I mean,
use, but
what we've been going over in class is that there's all types of speech. There's symbolic speech, there's actual prose, there's actual, verbal content that you can put out into the realm of Instagram or social media.
yeah.
There's
I-
different types of ways that you can interact with freedom of speech. It's
Yeah.
not just
I think it's also like those social media platforms, at the end of the day, they're private companies and they're not government run. So they can honestly do whatever they want.
So do you
Like-
think that's a benefit to not having the government run those companies, or have a say in what is moderating and what can and can't?
I mean, in some sense, I think there's like pros and cons to both. I guess. I don't
Okay.
know. I mean, if you don't trust the government, then yeah, it's great that they don't run that and they don't have control over.
But in a sense, if you think about United States and the government is run by people, right? It's senators and politicians are people just like us.
Well, kind of.
They have more power, right? They have
Yeah.
more influence. But if we give that opportunity for them to control the realms where we can speak out, and then if they deem, said speech from X person as unnecessary or as wrong, then they can just take that away. So I think it's important that we keep those platforms away from.
Yeah, right. Because then there would be like that infringement of freedom of speech.
They'll
And
be able
also,
to control.
I don't think like politicians are necessarily. I mean, I don't know. They don't always have like our best interests, honestly. They're like being paid off by people. They're not really representative of our
experience
Yeah.
or views or but no, I think you said a lot of great things, and I think a big reason for this project is to hear in-depth students and DU community per se to have conversations one-to-one, because we can interact with each other like we just met, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing that the cameras will never understand, or the people viewing. We just met, and we can share these views in a longer form content rather than just saying, oh, hi, I know Riley. And in a sense, we could potentially, just link up out of that. But I like these long form conversations because I get to hear your perspective, you get to hear my perspective, and then essentially this is what kind of grows out of speech, right? Out of freedom of speech. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for your help.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's all
Thanks
I
for
have.
having me.
Yeah. All right. So I'm joined with who today?
Riley Fisher.
Okay. And what are you studying here at DU?
I am a double major in psychology and communications, and I have a minor in wellness.
Wellness. What does that look like? Like, I've never heard of anyone say that they have a minor in wellness.
Well, the only reason why I'm a minor in wellness is because I was in the wellness LLC, but then I dropped out of the LLC before I got to DU, so I just kept the minor. But you kind of just take like random classes. Like right now I'm taking psychology of sex and intimate relationships, and it goes like towards the minor in wellness or like things like that. So it's kind of just been interesting.
So this is like kind of like the PLP program where there's only a minor offered for it. There's no like a full major for wellness.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Now we obviously are in the same project, the same group, right? We've been taking a course for freedom of speech now for 8 weeks. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's gone by so fast. But what is your understanding now that we're going through this course of freedom of speech? What have you learned? What has changed over time?
It's kind of funny because I feel like my understanding of freedom of speech has both, I understand it more, but it's also become a lot more complicated because I see it in a lot more of like everything we do, I guess. And like, for example, things like social media, or I don't know, just like applying free speech to real life context. I remember I've written about this a lot in our discussion posts, but like I remember I was studying abroad when Kanye West like went really crazy with like posting and like kind of making threats to people and also enabling like anti-Semitic whether it be comments or actions that were provoked by him. But regardless, coming back and learning a lot about like free speech and what's protected and what's not protected. And I remember like celebrities like Kanye West would argue a lot like, my First Amendment is being violated if I get suspended on social media. And now I know that's not true because private platforms on social media
can deem what is, what are the guidelines to being a community member on that platform, right?
Yeah. So I've learned that like a lot of things aren't protected.
So then if we were, moving away from social media in a sense, do you think people get more traction on social media platforms to make more actions, make more change, or will they get more, more traction to make a change, whatever idea in person, in I guess what you could call it like reality or in the real world, right? Yeah. Versus being on the online space.
So are you saying like, do you think movements and new
which
ideas
one's more effective?
Carry more momentum in real life or on social media? To be honest, I think especially after the pandemic, social media, like I remember, for example, like everybody posting the Black Square or, the George Floyd movement, things like that became so powerful because everybody's on social media. Whereas I think it's harder to reach people on such a grand perspective, not on social media. So yeah, I'd say social media.
And so, I think the same because it's like you can have both, right? You don't just have to have one. You can have both, and with those two, exactly, and that's how you can really make more of a positive effect change, right? So let's get into the questions. So how exactly do you interact with social media, and your platforms as of right now?
I feel like I definitely use it mostly to like keep up with other people. I kind of get a lot of, I guess the best way of describing it is like social media anxiety in terms of like what other people are thinking if I post something. So I don't really engage a lot in like expressing my opinions, especially like political ones on social media.
I have found, and it's interesting that you bring this up, that anxiety of social media, right? Because the platforms that I use, or the reason I use my platforms is for an artistic sense, right? A lot of the content that I produce is mainly for the podcast, mainly for other creative endeavors. So I never really have that, anxiety to worry about what people may think. I may have the worry that people won't like, my creative endeavors, but it's interesting that now if you just want to use it, you have an anxiety to use it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's crazy to hear.
It's
of.
a whole other level. I have like a specific memory in mind of like my older brother is whatever. We just share different like political views. And I remember I reposted something and him and I were on the phone one time and he's like, yeah, my friend mentioned like your sister's off the rails too far to the left or something like that. It was just like really out of context.
Yeah, yeah.
Also like it's kind of offensive and you're like, oh my gosh, like are a lot of people thinking that about me?
Yeah, like people may think I'm, in a sense, dumb, right? Because it's like,
because like this
nobody wants to be called dumb.
or
right?
just like minimized to a post
exactly.
that you reshared.
Exactly.
Like I haven't seen this guy in like maybe 5 years, but the fact that he can still comment on like me and my life is so bizarre simply because of a social media post.
Do you think you now have tougher skin that you've been using social media for a longer time? Like no.
If anything, it's made me more like conscious of like, oh, I shouldn't post. I'm more so of like I won't post something.
So
if
you'd
I
rather
question
not
it.
post it than go with the trouble of having to go with people commenting on that, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
You just kind of take your own leave of absence. You'll take the Fifth Amendment. Just I'd rather not say.
Yeah.
I'd rather not speak on it. That's interesting because the whole idea of social media is to create a platform, a marketplace of ideas, right?
Yeah.
And people are still scared to share that because, again, and I do understand why. There's consequences that can come from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's consequences that could, go beyond your career, go beyond your personal life, and just your personal network, which is scary. So now when you interact with your social media platforms, how often do you find posts, ideas, people that don't share the same values or that, share things that you just don't really like? How often do you think you find that?
I think every day.
Really?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm really not that like opinionated towards things, but I follow a lot of people and I think like I obviously go to school in Denver, but I grew up in a very rural small town. Like I went to school with some serious like I don't know, radical people, if that's the word you want to use. So sometimes you just see things they post and like I almost get more of like an entertainment out of it because I'm very like dissociated
in a sense. I've been talking about this so much. You live a dual life, right? Because you have your life, the cultural norms that you had growing up, and then now you come to Denver.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a different cultural.
I definitely resonate more so with Denver, but like it's still when I see things from my hometown, I'm like, that is so classic that you would post that.
Do you think people understand, or even the people that here at your time here at DU know that you're in between this space of like growing up in a rural area? Because where did you say you grew up in?
Upstate New York.
Upstate New York. So
very small town.
So a small town, and then you come to a city, we're actually in the presence of it. There's cars bustling right under us. There's people walking right.
Yeah.
Very different cultural. Do you think you have other people that understand your presence?
I think like people that know me and like know my background definitely take it into account of like how I see things. And it's outside of my town too. Like my family I've mentioned is like very politically specifically divided. So I just think when it comes to freedom of speech, I am all in favor of like, I've heard some people say some things where I'm like, you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
But you know, if that's what you really believe, like I'm not gonna, I don't know, I guess judge you for that. I'm all in favor of that, I guess, because I've heard so many opinions, but also I have an understanding that like there's a line of things that are meant to be said and things
Yes.
that are just blatantly, you know, not helpful or hurtful.
And have you ever had that experience in your personal friend group where things happen where they say, they share an idea or a viewpoint, and let's say like, and I think I brought this question up in class as well. It's like, let's say you're really good friends 10 years prior, right? You know this person, they know your family, you interact with them, and you feel safe, right? And when they share a view that you don't necessarily agree with or can resonate with, do you think that relationship should be cut and dry, ended right there? Or is there a way to
Well,
muddle that out and work towards a relationship?
yeah, I'd like to go back to like my home. I have like a group of friends of like 5 girls who are very like strongly opinionated. And I remember being like juniors in high school and we got into this like major fight and we didn't fight much about, is homelessness a choice? And like
okay.
we grew up in a town where there was not homelessness. Like none of us really had that much like background on it. But I remember we were like yelling at each other and like
Wow.
we left the fight like mad at each other, I guess, just because like I don't know. But anyways, to answer your question, I think like experiences with having such like open and like almost argumentative conversations with people who like we all know each other like to the core, kind of changed my opinion on how things like you can have an opinion and then like I know at least for me I went back on that conversation and said like I don't agree with what I originally said, and they were like I'm glad if it was anything like I was able to hear them, and it just I don't know, it changed into a learning moment before like a canceled moment or like a friendship over movement, if you know what I mean.
Now, what are your views on this movement of canceling and in a sense there is forms where I do agree, like,
Yeah.
we should speak out and say, you kind of messed up, dude,
Yeah.
like you kind of messed up, but just in general views, what do you see the benefit or the hinders of cancel?
Well, I'm going to go back to the Kanye West thing really quickly because I remember during that time frame, he was huge on like, you can't cancel people because people don't learn when you cancel them and yada, yada, yada. Yet he used that as a reason to say like whatever he pleased, no matter he said horrible, like hateful, anti-Semitic things. And yet he used like, so anyways, to use this as an example, I definitely think like cancel culture doesn't leave room for people to learn and people to grow, but it's also, I don't think it's like gives you fair game. Like I think if you say multiple things that are hateful, you deserve to be held accountable for that. And if that means that people permanently are like, you are not a good person, you've proven that time and time again, then you kind of do deserve to be canceled.
Yeah. And we see the effects of it, especially I remember this, I wrote about it in one post with Kevin Hart and his comments about homosexuality and his kids. And that went on so far to mess up his, professional career, which again, Kevin Hart had gone on to say, you know what, these are my views. And I was young then, and now I'm very apologetic towards what was said.
Yeah.
But people felt that it wasn't genuine. And they went on to punish him further and further and further until they messed with what, his job, right?
Yeah, see, that's not fair.
And that's where I think I can get behind, okay, yeah, sometimes there is a place where we need to step in and say, hey, you know what? You kind of messed up, dude.
Yeah.
But we can see change. We can open this dialogue. But I think we have to get out of that online space, right? Because like we've talked about, it's very binary on social media, especially Twitter or Instagram, wherever. You're the in or the out. So I think the last question would be: how do you think you have used your First Amendment right to freedom of speech here on campus, or do you feel like it's maybe something that how do you feel you've used your right to freedom of speech here on campus or here as a college student?
I guess that's a kind of a good question because looking back on my 4 years and on like really big movements, I don't really, and I kind of feel guilty saying this, I don't really remember having like a major part in it. Like I remember when We Can Do Better came out, I remember like reading all the posts and like absorbing all the information. And same thing with, there was a walkout during school for some reason. And I remember I was in class and I like saw everyone walking out. And I remember like I obviously read a lot about it and everything and like I understood everything going on, but I really didn't exercise much of like an opinion, which is maybe just as equally exercising freedom of speech as not saying anything.
Yeah, no,
doing
yeah,
anything.
definitely.
So I guess just over these past 4 years, like how have I interacted with it? I would just say like I was aware of it all, like social, movements going on and everything, but I really didn't take much of a firm stance on a lot.
So do you think the social pushes you more to either hinder or speak out? Do you think the people in your social network have pushed you to either stay silent or to speak out about certain things?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think it's more so of just like me personally, unless I feel like really strongly about something, I'm more so just willing to like, I don't know, be neutral about it. I'm okay with being neutral.
Okay. But yeah, I think that's everything for all I have. And I think we went over, but
Yeah, we probably did, but
yeah,
thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Obviously, this whole production isn't possible without all you guys' help because I couldn't have done it without all you guys. But
Yeah, of course.
thank you. All right, so who do I have the pleasure with sitting today? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Marcus. I'm a senior. Should I go through the whole thing? Or?
No. So we're just gonna switch it off. So Marcus,
I'm Marcus.
fourth year, right?
Yeah,
What
year.
What are you studying?
I'm a molecular bio and psych
Whoa,
major.
STEM major. Okay,
Yeah,
this is interesting because we haven't had anyone with the STEM major just yet. So this is a good demographic. And then
I'm Sophie, and I'm doing the exact same majors as Marcus.
okay, perfect. Both STEM majors. And both fourth years?
Yep.
What are the plans after? Because you guys are graduating next quarter, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna be going to the Peace Corps to
Okay.
the Philippines, and I'll like with the youth development program. So
Awesome.
I'll be doing that for 2 years, and then thinking about med school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Overachiever. Wow.
Not really.
And what made you want to join the or go into the Peace Corps?
The Peace Corps, it was something I always really wanted to do. It was like something like go travel, do some service kind of thing. And I specifically chose the Philippines because, or I wanted to do something with like health. So, working with communities, people, or the interpersonal relationships at least.
Wow. Okay. And then Sophie, right?
Tough to follow that up, but
Yeah. No. Hey.
my boyfriend's from Hawaii, so I'm trying to convince him to move back there with me and take me there.
So then,
That's what I'm
where's your
working on.
boyfriend? Is he in college as well?
He's here at school. I met him here. Yeah.
Oh, at DU as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you guys want to, or you want to move back? Does he?
Yes.
Does he want to
No,
move back? Okay.
But we're working on it.
Okay.
My mission after graduation.
Have you been to Hawaii?
Yeah, I visited once,
What-
but I'm really scared of planes.
What do you recommend
so-
for all the people that haven't had the opportunity? What's the first like beginner thing to do?
the beach?
The beach? Which beach?
I liked Flags. It's like in Kailua. It was really cool.
Not bad. And how long is that flight?
Sorry, what?
How long is the flight?
From here, it's like 6 or 7 hours.
Oh, okay. That's 2 hours more than New York, so it's not terrible.
Yeah.
It's not
really
terrible.
scary,
I would have
though.
thought it was
I
longer.
hate it. Over the ocean.
All right, so let's start off with the first question. So we're doing a project revolving around a class of free speech, seminar on free speech, right? So what is your guys' understanding of free speech as of right now?
I guess I'll go first. I think it's just being able to say what you want and not have it being like blocked or anything.
Okay.
Or, like being able to put what you want to say out there into the world. and not having like some other entity take it down or something. Like
Perfect. Okay.
Are we talking like free speech in the context of America, like
Yes.
how it is right now?
In the U.S., yes.
Well, I think how it's supposed to be is being allowed to say what you want. However, like I know there's something about fighting words. You're not supposed to use those or something.
Yes, you brought up
And so there are things that are off limits. However, like you have a pretty free range.
and do you guys know why this was put in place, this First Amendment? Just a quick basic quiz pop question.
just like freedom of press. It's like
Is to go against the government, right?
Yeah,
To speak
it's to
out,
be able to-
to be
yeah.
able to speak out against it, right? Because obviously, when for the Constitution, the UK, Britain had rule over the United States, the 13 colonies, and that was the law, right? Now that we have freedom of speech, we can speak out against our government without punishment. That's the whole idea, that we can be skeptical, right? There's skepticism is good, right? We shouldn't always believe what we see or what we hear from people. We need to do our own research and stuff like that, right? So that was one of the reasons why, or the importances of freedom of speech, right? So in terms of freedom of speech, how important is it to you, both of you guys, as college students, as how high is that value for you guys, I guess? How high up is that value?
You know, I care to an extent, but like I'm a STEM major, so this isn't like my passion. Like I appreciate the like ability to voice my opinions, especially like politically. But I'm also kind of like anybody who differs from my opinions politically, they shouldn't be able to say.
Okay, okay. So this is the interesting conversation that this is the demographic we should be
Yeah.
talking to, right?
Maybe I'm not so free speech if you don't think my way.
Okay, so it's your way or the highway.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you what are your how important would you rank your value of freedom of speech?
I would think mine's a little bit opposite, and I would say it's pretty high. And I think like there's bad takes out there, but sure, they should still get a say.
Okay.
They should still get a say. They should still
Okay. And so I guess bringing it back to what you said, and if it's your way or the highway, why should it be that, or why do you feel that way?
You know, I'm just a stubborn person, so
Okay.
I say that. However, in reality, I understand that there's differing opinions and people should be able to voice those. It just frustrates me when people are like, I don't know, saying stuff about women, especially regarding our bodies.
Okay.
That just makes me feel like you shouldn't get an opinion at all.
Yeah, and there is terms where in this class we've been talking about that necessarily because you put speech out into the marketplace, right? That's what we call the space where ideas kind of float, right? The marketplace. Just because other people have differing views, necessarily doesn't mean that it's hate speech towards you, right? It's just a liberty that this person is putting it out there into the marketplace, and then they can use that freedom of speech, that right,
Yeah.
which is very difficult to understand at times because, again, I see the point where you're coming from, especially Roe v. Wade. That was something that happened, overturning of abortion in certain states, leaving it up to discretion of states. I bet it's very difficult. I can't speak because obviously I'm not a woman and how those sentiments necessarily feel, but I can see why there's sentiments of that.
Yeah,
Right?
and I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't say any opinion differing from mine is hate speech, but there's definitely a point where it's harmful. And I mean, it's gotten to the point where they have overturned Roe v. Wade, which has caused a ton of harm. So I don't know. It's frustrating.
And it is a difficult line to pull between, how can we in court of law say that this is a cause, right? It's so hard to put on paper. And even for you guys that are, you guys have this analytical side of thinking, right? Like, this is the way things are, and that's the only way. But when it comes to communication, and the realm where we are, it's things can be interpreted by different loads of people in different ways.
I think that brings a really important point with the whole communication thing, especially in the science community, of being able to communicate our like findings or information in a way that's understood to people who are not as well versed or don't have the background knowledge.
And okay, so now that we're moving on, how do you think you interact with your social media platforms? How do you use them? What is their use for you personally, both of you guys?
This is where I can't talk much because I don't have any social media.
Okay.
Like, to speak, like email is it and text.
And why is that?
Okay, so why? It was just like a kind of distraction, I guess.
Okay.
And it was like a time suck kind of thing of just scrolling through random or scrolling through the feed or whatever. It's not really. It's kind of. It doesn't feel as like real, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's like,
And that's interesting because a lot of the arguments that people say against, very harmful speech or hate speech per se, is like, well, if you don't want to look at it, just turn it off, right? But then let's see, in your point, why don't you do what he does and just get off of the platform,
I
right?
do. Like,
Okay.
I'm also not super present on social media. I do have Instagram, and I have like a couple posts, but like I mostly just like to look at my friends' stuff, and I don't really take it into politics like as much. Like every once in a while there's an infographic I'll have on my story. But that's about like the extent of it, and I also try to limit my time.
Okay. So and I do see that it is a time suck, and since I do operate like this is the stuff where I have to upload, I have to use these platforms.
Are we going on platforms?
What do you mean? Yeah, yes.
we just signed
Yes.
the thing to go on platform.
Yeah, YouTube, Spotify, and
Spotify, is it a podcast?
it is a podcast. I do it audio. So,
We read this. We read
and we'll
this.
give you the lowdown of where you can find it.
Okay.
But now we go into the realms of social media as a private entity, right? These platforms are private owners or private companies, and in these companies, they want to drive viewership. They want to drive people to continue using their platforms so that way they can get more money, get more advertising, get more eyes to display ads and stuff like that. Do you think by those companies choosing what can and can't be pushed out to the general public, is that a sense of infringing on freedom of speech, or in a sense are they within their right?
Can you kind of repeat?
So social media as a whole, right? We're users of social media, right? We produce content for the platform. It goes to the platform, and then it's moderated by them, and then they decide if it's going to be pushed out to other viewers or if it's going to be.
Okay.
Do you think that's in a sense of limiting of freedom of speech, or are they within the right?
I mean, I don't know too much about it, so I don't know exactly what they're limiting. But it does sound like
Okay, let's do an example then. Kim Kardashian, she has a huge following.
Yeah.
Her posts go in front of millions of people when she makes one post. Now let's say you make a post on Instagram. Does that get shared to the same amount of people the next day?
No.
So that's where the discrepancy is, right?
So
Do you
you're
think?
saying people with like in positions of power are getting more outreach, more audience?
Yeah, and they can be pushed out way faster or
Okay.
to more communities.
Yeah, like to an extent. However, it depends on like how much people are actually taking interest in these people and what kind of people are, I guess. Like, and like I know they'll have like brand deals or whatever,
Yeah.
and they'll be able to sell stuff, which like good for them. But like that doesn't really affect me, so I don't care so much.
Yeah.
However, if it were like more political,
Would
I mean there
about,
are.
like, the news, for example, they now, yeah, but like for like for the news, you see like live. I think it was like the Ohio right now. There's like not yeah, Ohio. The disaster of like the train.
Parliament, I think, or something
It's talking about like the
where there's the whole explosion or something. Yeah,
that.
there's pollution.
It wasn't like publicized until later. So something like that.
Well, yeah, that's like tragic. That's awful. Yeah, I heard about that through Twitter, like not like through a big news source. And like those things being censored are definitely harmful. And I'm aware that like a lot of stuff that gets through, especially on like mainstream media, is like either super like exaggerated or like just so unimportant compared to other things going on in the world. And I would agree that that's a problem. However, like if it's hard to say whether that's like an infringement of free speech, though, I guess.
And that's the difficult part about all of this, right?
Yeah.
Because when we go into, let's say, the workspace and we want to have these types of conversations where, let's say, you know, have you guys heard about what Kanye said, you know, a couple months back and how those were some very hurtful and hateful comments? Then you have, like, let's say you go into a workplace and then you say someone supports or even says, oh, yeah, Kanye's within his right of freedom of speech. We want to be able to, I at least through this, want to be able to open those platforms to say, okay, how do you want to engage with that? How do you want to open that discussion versus you going like, you're a horrible person, you shouldn't think that, and open it to a dialogue, right? Because we get a lot of times on social media these Twitter wars or canceling. I know you guys, have you heard of what canceling is? And I really want to try and do something where we find different ways of communication. And that's why podcasting, I believe, is such a good form of doing so, because before this, we didn't know each other, right? We never would have interacted. Now I know a little bit about you. I don't know everything, but I know you're exercising your freedom of speech right now to not go on those platforms. You don't want to be involved in that. You don't want to be involved in that time suck or that commitment to having to keep up with social media and pop culture per se. And that's your stance on that. In the other sense, we have Sophia, right?
Yeah.
Sophia, who says, you know what, there should be more moderation within your right? It's totally believable. I don't, sometimes there is cases where people shouldn't have the full range of the use of the internet, right? And that's where we have to find that interaction of what's the best solution to work towards it. Do we all get off of it or do we not allow anyone on it?
I don't think it has to be so extreme.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like, there are definitely limits, and like you brought up Kanye earlier, he definitely passed a limit. Like that was not okay.
And even
he should suffer
even
consequences.
and even here, like the students that right now with
Oh yeah.
Hillel at
Yeah.
you know what they did over there with that community and the Jewish
Yeah.
community.
That
That should not be
allowed.
exactly. There should be consequences. There should be
Yeah.
punishment. There's no way that could be, you know, freedom of speech. I find it very difficult to say that because that is hurting and endangering a community per se.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Maybe that's the limit when it hurts or endangers a community.
but that's where we put it on paper. That's where it gets a little difficult when it involves social media, right?
Valid.
Because here it was a physical action. That's easy to point out.
I think a lot of this, I'm a big proponent of like, you know, like I guess I forget what the term is, but like the education part of the schooling, the education system. I think there could be a lot more work done on that side.
Yes.
To show or to push for. I'm losing the terms.
And I think me coming from a communication studies aspect, we do a lot to philosophize, right? We do a lot of theory, but we don't put it into practice. Like this is us putting it into practice.
Yeah.
This is the first time my third year put it into practice. So I'm happy, you know, that I'm doing stuff like this, but I think this should be more part of the curriculum more often.
Yeah.
And across all majors as well.
Yeah.
I think it's very important.
policy is always something difficult that I had no idea like about. So it's an interesting, or it's always something to be thinking about, I think.
But I think that's all my questions. Thank you guys for sitting down. But yeah, so hopefully we can get this uploaded this weekend. If not, next weekend. But if you want, I can send you through email a link of the channel that we're going to post on. And yeah, you guys can see yourselves. But yeah, so who do I have the pleasure with sitting with today?
My name is Charlotte Yedo.
Charlotte Yeda. And what year are you here at the University of Denver?
I am a senior.
Senior, on your way out, right?
Yes.
What are you
13
studying?
weeks left. Communications and public relations.
Hey, that's strange because I've never had a class with you. I'm communications as well.
We might have had it on Zoom. But
Maybe.
then don't remember because like
Yeah,
it was Zoom.
yeah, exactly. It was Zoom.
No one wanted to be on that.
So what are the plans after graduation? I know those are the big questions.
Yeah, you got me there. I don't think I can move back home because it's very expensive.
Where are you from?
Miami, Florida.
Wow.
So unless I'm paying $2,000 a month for a studio, it's not happening.
But what about the surrounding areas of
that
Miami?
is the surrounding areas. Unless I want to be in the city center paying $3,000 to $3,500 for an apartment
Jeez, that's more than
that I don't
here.
even own.
Yeah.
Exactly.
More than
so
here.
probably stay here for a year or two, get some experience, more experience, and then apply for jobs there.
Wow. Now I'm interested in this. What's the difference that you find from Miami to here?
Diversity.
Diversity? Yeah.
Here, the lack thereof.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I miss my Latin people,
Okay.
my Cuban people.
Okay. Boricua.
No, that's Dominican.
No, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
We're
I thought-
oh my gosh. Que hola, sere.
Have you? So I'm guessing you grew up with a large Latin population, right?
Yes, my father's Cuban Colombian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting.
But yes, diversity, cost of rent is cheaper here.
and it's interesting because we say, oh, it's so expensive here.
Yeah, no,
we
it's
think
nothing compared to other cities.
yeah, and even
Yeah.
if we go to New York, I bet that is even.
Yeah, no, Miami's up there with New York now, so it's messed up. It's
Yeah.
messed up.
Okay, well,
All right.
let's
Yeah.
let's get into it. What is your understanding of freedom of speech now as college student,
Okay.
being 4 years in college?
It's part of your First Amendment. There's
Okay.
5 things to your First Amendment, so it's one of them, and it's essentially to be protected by the government. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. From
From-
oppressing your speech.
Yes, because essentially it was put in place to speak out or be skeptical about the government.
Yes.
Right? Now, how do you feel you interact with your First Amendment right?
I do believe in freedom of speech, obviously, but I don't believe in someone's rights to go around saying racial slurs of
Yeah.
any kind.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, in the 70s, there was a march in a small town outside of Illinois in a largely Jewish community, and it was a neo-Nazi march, and the Supreme Court actually allowed that to happen. So now just looking at it, I don't agree with it. So I guess entirely I don't agree with freedom of speech.
Now, that's the big. We've been taking all my group members. We've been taking a course, right? Because freedom of speech is protected when there's methods that people can either look away or get away from speech, turn away from it. There's ways that people can disengage from that conversation,
Yes.
right? But that doesn't mean just because someone is offended by said speech that it is deemed as
Hate speech.
hate speech. There has to be a probable, threat or
Yes.
intent of harm.
Yes.
And that's very difficult. We found that it's very difficult to prove in the Supreme Court on a piece of paper because when it comes to communication, interpretations come into play. Everyone has,
Yeah.
their own view and the way that they can
Of
interpret
course.
things, right?
Yes.
So that's where it gets difficult. Now let's take it a step further, right? Social media in that realm. That is not in the physical. That is all in
Virtual.
a virtual space, in virtual setting. How do you think you've interacted with your social media as of right now, personally?
I would say the main platform I use is TikTok.
Okay.
For a few years of my life, after like having been on social media, I deleted all of it. So I try to limit it as much as possible. And ever since then, I just don't use it as much. But I just use it to like post with my friends and just kind of show other people, my hometown friends from Miami, what's going on in my life, or just people that I don't regularly engage with.
Are you anxious that you may offend some people, or are you conscious of the stuff that you post on your social media to be wary of?
Yeah. If it's something like my Instagram story where I have like a lot of people I actually know following me, I am more conscious of it. I don't just like post. I try to stay pretty liberal and not post some of my more radical ideas. But on a platform like Twitter, which I use probably actually just as much as TikTok, since it's not my real name and a lot of people who follow me don't know me, I am a lot more radical on a platform like that. Also, that platform has a lot more like relaxed terms and conditions and guidelines. So it's TikTok and like Instagram are heavily monitored, whereas Twitter has a lot less of that monitoring.
The moderation.
Yeah, the moderation isn't as high on other social media platforms.
And it's good that you understand and you know how to work within that, right? Because then you know how to tailor said speech or text. I guess we can call them text, right? Because text can be interpreted in many different forms, pictures, prose, whatever. And it's good that you understand that, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that people will go onto certain platforms and say, "Oh, this is deemed horrible." Well, what is the general
100%.
what is the general use of the platform, right? We go on Reddit, forum.
You're looking up stuff.
Exactly.
Or reading about what people care to share.
And then you go into Instagram, that's seen as more polished, more YouTube, a little more polished.
Friend oriented.
Yes, a little more family friendly oriented. And I think there's a lack of understanding, or maybe even a want or a drive to make all platforms the same. And I don't think that should be necessarily the case, because then if we all have the same platforms, then there's not going to be any nuance on it.
100% agree. I think like the difference between Reddit and Twitter from something like TikTok and Instagram is obviously to have those two, like the two later platforms that I had mentioned, the latter, there's no anonymity. Like you can't be anonymous to use those platforms unless that's like kind of your whole thing, like people who get on, like put on masks and then post on TikTok. But if you're using it like the general citizen that's just posting like day-to-day life or special activities they attended, your face is in it. Whereas Reddit and Twitter, you don't need to have your profile picture be you. Reddit, it's an avatar if you so want it. So I think with that anonymity, those spaces are why there's so much more radical ideas rather than Instagram
because
or
they
TikTok.
feel a little more protected.
Yes.
Per se, right? Now, I think the next question is, how often do you find posts on Twitter? I guess you say is your more radical, right, use of platform that you don't agree with, or that you just don't. That you don't agree with. How often?
So before Elon Musk bought the platform, like it was very like there was more left-leaning algorithm, but it was also a lot more like for you, like from your personal algorithm. Whereas now, since he's bought it, you have like the update with like you can buy Twitter Blue, so you're pushed to the top of the algorithm if you pay for Twitter. And then like he's just a right-leaning person, so those are now pushed to the top. So ever since then, I've seen it a lot more than before.
Do you think that's productive in a sense to engage in a marketplace of ideas, or has it been detrimental to the platforms?
It's definitely been reductive, because and even if you do pay for Twitter and you're like more left leaning, your tweets aren't pushed to like the top anymore. But again, even if you do either side, your tweets are pushed to the top. So it's like you kind of have to pay to have like a space to like be seen your speech. So I think it's just entirely reductive, either side, like whether they were pushing left or right, just the fact that it's now commodified, like speech has been on that platform. If you pay, you're pushed to the top.
And what I really don't see that, and here's where I'll disagree with you on a certain point, and we'll have to wrap it up soon. But
Okay.
essentially, Instagram is the same thing, right? They're pushing an algorithm towards you, a specialized recipe for you to keep engaging with this, so that your
Yes.
eyes can be commodified. So now this is where we're seeing a lot of platforms doing the same. They're moderating in a sense, so that way you can be more engaged.
Yeah, but the difference is you don't have to pay for it on a space
Yeah,
like
no,
Twitter.
that
But
is
no,
true.
I do agree with like the algorithm, and also like there's always someone behind it working it. So, and that goes into this whole conversation about like AI, but
Yeah.
and like this new conversation with Chat GTP or whatever it's called, and the people behind it pushing like a left leaning agenda. I mean, there's always going to be someone behind the algorithm.
Yep. Someone has to create it.
And I know like the dangers of having like your For You page creating an echo chamber of ideas on either side. I just think like we kind of need to make the platforms a little more fair, and especially be concerned about anyone trying to commodify speech.
So then, okay, then we'll wrap it up real quick.
Yeah.
Do you think these platforms, social media realms, should be an avenue to push outside of the virtual space and into?
What do you mean?
So should these conversations be started on virtual platforms, then be moved out of those spaces into real life to have real discussions with real people, like said right now?
Yeah.
But obviously, this takes a lot of infrastructure and a lot of time, a lot of effort.
I think the start of the conversation, I actually have my viewed flip will always be offline before it is online. Like, first of all, you have to create a dialogue that keeps both sides of this conversation interested. And again, that just comes from like chatting with, I think, people in real life, reading like, there's so much I can say online that'll seem radical, but my tone of voice might land for someone different than just reading it, which is why I think the conversations start here and then move online.
Okay.
But yeah, I do think it's important to
Yes.
keep in both spaces to keep this conversation going of how to keep freedom of speech fair in like real life and online.
And I think it's very important because before this, I didn't know you and we never met, right?
No.
We never interacted. And now I know a little bit more about
Yes.
your views and what potentially other people's views are. So I think this is good to see and to hear, which is great for our comm classes to
Yes.
put into action. But thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me.
Yes, no, thank you for taking the opportunity.